Hey everyone, it's J-Rock here. Thanks for joining me for this unboxing, setup, install, and modification video for Fzone Co2 generator. After removing the outer box, we see two boxes, some instructions, and unfortunately these are not the best instructions, as it does not go over proper assembly nor have the right amount of ingredients listed to get the most out of your CO2 gen. More about this later. In one of the boxes, we have a well-made CO2 bottle. This bottle is made from 304 stainless steel that's 1.5 millimeters thick. That sustains a pressure of over 1100 psi. Our pressures don't even ever come close to that, so there's no risk of explosion with this bottle. And in the other box is all the parts that we need for our CO2 gen. There is a measuring cup and funnel. In a small box is our glass items. This is an in-tank diffuser. It is shaped like a J and has a ceramic disc in it that has micro holes in it that emit tiny bubbles. There is also a couple of suction cups included in the box. Then we have our U connector for the rim of the tank. This is specifically for rimless tanks, although with modification of the rim, this can be used on rim tanks too. Stay tuned to see how we do that. This box has the regulator parts in it, packed in pretty well by foam, so the parts don't get damaged during shipping. I always feel like there's something to be said about good packing. They have included an extra O-ring for the regulator. You gotta love that. This is the bubble counter. This is made from acrylic in the window, and the rest is made of metal. I really like that this piece isn't made of glass, as I would probably break it. This black thing is the filter for the regulator. It keeps the citric acid and sodium bicarbonate from entering the regulator and crystallizing inside of it. This silver thing with the gauges and the FZ logo on top, this is your regulator. It has two gauges to tell you the inner pressure and the other gauge is to tell you your working pressure or your output pressure. The knob with the ring attached to it is called a safety pressure relief valve. This valve will pop open if too much pressure is inside the bottle. The last knob is a needle valve, and that is used to adjust your bubbles. There is also a sticker on the bottom where the filter goes. This white box will have your electric plug, the plug for the solenoid, and the solenoid itself in it. A solenoid opens and closes the gate for the CO2 to move forward into the bubble counter. Next we have CO2 specific tubing. Regular tubing is known to wear really fast with CO2, so CO2 specific tubing is recommended, and it also comes with 4 suction cups. Now that we have all our parts unboxed, let's start getting everything set up, put together, and installed. The first thing we're going to want to do is put together the regulator. So you're going to want to grab the regulator. Also get the filter, the bubble counter, the solenoid, and a pair of pliers. You can set everything else aside for right now. Let's do this. To start, let's grab the regulator and let's remove the yellow sticker on the bottom. I also clean any sticker residue left behind by simply scraping at it lightly. Next, we're going to install the black filter, where the sticker just was. Make sure the O-ring is pushed all the way down and simply screw it into the hole till it's tight by hand. There's no need to really crank on it or use any tools. It should just twist in clockwise really easy. Once you're done with that, just set it aside for a minute. Next, grab your solenoid. We need to remove the cap by simply unscrewing it. We don't need the cap. Make sure there is a black O-ring on the nipple under the cap. There are 2 extras in the solenoid bag. Next, screw the bubble counter into the solenoid. This should also be super simple and just needs hand tightening. Next, we're going to attach the regulator and the solenoid together. And this can be a little tricky as you'll need to hold the solenoid and the regulator and screw it together all at the same time. The solenoid will swivel until you get it tight enough, so this can be a little tricky. Once you get it finger tight, finish tightening it the rest of the way with the pliers, while holding it so it can't swivel. And that's it. Let's set the finished regulator aside while we set up the diffuser. To assemble the diffuser, you will need the diffuser, the U-connector, the tubing, a pair of scissors, and a heat gun or lighter or some way of warming up the tubing. To get started, cut a piece of tubing. The length will be how far down into the tank the diffuser will go, but don't attach it yet. Next, grab the U-connector. Make sure you understand the orientation of how the line is set up. The diffuser looks like a J, and the U-connector should flow away from the J, like a hook. When you have the orientation down, let's set the line. Grab the heat gun or whatever you have and heat up the end of the tube and push it onto the U connector. Same with the short tube we cut. Heat it up, push it on the U. When you've got that all set up, heat up the other end of the short tube. Then grab your diffuser and put it on there. Make sure to pay attention to the orientation. Again, this should look like a J with a hook. Okay, so let's talk about DIY CO2. If you look at the instructions on the paper or on the side of the bottle, it says 200 grams of part A to 400 grams of part B for the 2.5 liter kit. And it says to add 600 grams of part A and 800 grams of part B for the 4 liter kit. But if you look on the top of the bottle, there is a ring that faces around the bottleneck, and it says 200 grams of part A and 220 grams of part B for the 2.5 liter kit. And the 4 liter kit bottleneck label says 600 grams of part A and 600 grams of part B. So right away we have 2 different recipes, and the weights are very different. On the side label it says to add 400 grams of part B, and on the top it says 220. So how do we know how much citric acid and sodium bicarbonate to use? And how do we get the most out of the material to produce the most CO2 in the reaction? It's actually quite simple. We use science. Science says to maximize the yield of CO2 gas, we should use 1 mole of citric acid and 3 moles of sodium bicarbonate, also known as baking soda. These mole numbers can be converted to mass by using the molecular weights. For baking soda, it's 84 grams to 1 mole. And for citric acid, it's 192 grams for 1 mole, roughly. So the ratio we want is 3 to 1, or 252 divided by 192 equals 1.3. So for every 1 gram of citric acid, we want 1.3 grams of sodium bicarbonate. This will give us the most amount of CO2 the material can produce. So, in a 2.5 liter bottle, the proper mixture is 200 grams of citric acid to 260 grams of sodium bicarbonate to complete the reaction with 300 mils of water. If you're setting up a 4 liter kit, the proper mixture is 600 grams of citric acid to 786 grams of baking soda to complete the reaction with 900 mils of water. So knowing what we know now based off science, when we look at the original recipe of the 200 grams of part A and the 400 grams of part B, we can tell that this mixture would have unused baking soda left over. This unused baking soda would have crystallized and been wasted. And if we look at the second recipe of 200 grams of part A to the 220 grams of part B, we can tell that there wouldn't have been enough baking soda available to complete the reaction, wasting our citric acid. So hopefully this makes sense, and we all learned how to produce the max reaction when doing DIY CO2. So now we have our formula, let's go make some CO2. You will need a scale for our next step, and the scale needs to weigh in grams, and we got this one at Walmart for around 15 bucks, but you can get them at just about any grocery store. You will also need the raw materials citric acid and baking soda. These items will normally need to be ordered. We get ours on Amazon, and I use Millard's, and I use micro-ingredient citric acid in 5 and 6 pound bags. The baking soda is a 12-pound bag. For both ingredients, it was around $35 to $40. I get several fills out of those, so it lasts about a year. So you figure about 1 year of CO2 costs about $40. Weigh out both your materials and use the included funnel to get them into the bottle. It seems almost impossible not to spill any, so be ready to clean up afterwards. Measure out your water and get ready to pour it in. A little tip would be to pre-screw the regulator on and make sure that it's going to go on smooth. Also to figure out where the threading starts, so once you pour your water in, you can get the regulator on as fast as possible. Also, use cold water to slow down the reaction. The faster you get the regulator on, the more CO2 you're going to have. When you're ready, tilt the bottle and pour the water in as fast as you can, and get the regulator on the top as fast as you can while tilting it. The reason we tilt the bottle is to trap as much gas as we can inside, and the angle helps keep the gas in the curve of the bottle. The reaction starts right away. You will notice the bottom of the bottle get cold as the pressure rises. This reaction can take a little while, but will mostly happen in the first day. And alright, we're ready to fill up the bubble counter now with some water. So go ahead and unscrew the first cap to reveal the air hose nipple. Make sure you keep that cap as it goes on the air hose before we connect it. And then unscrew the top cap, fill up the bubble counter with some water, and put the top cap back on. Alright, so now's a great time to find a good spot to set your bottle on near the tank that you plan to run the CO2 to. You might consider a few things here. For one, you will need an electrical plug available for the solenoid. You also might consider how accessible your bottle is, and also what level you place your bottle at. Is that at, above, or below tank level? Just in case the built-in check valve fails. I've never really experienced this, but I place all my bottles at or above tank level. I also have a perfect spot for this one, next to the tank and next to my big Fzone 4-liter Gen. So once you have your bottles set up in a good accessible location, let's set up the diffuser tube to the bubble counter. Simply unscrew the cap on top of the bubble counter if it's there, as we took it off to fill it up. Then, slide it onto the tube so that it can be screwed back on once connected. Then, push the hose onto the nipple. If you can't get it on, just heat it up a little bit, and after you get it on, screw the cap back on, and let's go put our diffuser in the tank. Alright, so now it's time to put our diffuser in the tank. I use 3 suction cups, one at the top, one on the diffuser to hold it in place, and one on the line towards the bottom. Put it where you want it, and push them to stick on the sides of the tank. Our U connector wasn't made for rim tanks, but I found for rim tanks 40 gallons and below, you can modify the rim. I use an old hobby style soldering iron to melt the plastic. If the U connector is not wide enough, then simply don't use it, and hook the diffuser to the hose coming off the bubble counter. Okay, so we're ready to turn it on. The first thing you want to do is make sure that your needle valve is closed. So turn that clockwise to turn it off. Then plug in the wire to the solenoid and the solenoid wire into the wall plug and get that plugged in. A red light should pop on onto the solenoid and you might hear a click. The click is basically the gate opening, allowing the flow of gas to the bubble counter. Next, you want to turn the needle valve counterclockwise till you see the flow of gas in the bubble counter. A tip would be to put the solenoid on a timer once you have a fill for your needle valve, as each needle valve seems to fill a little bit different. So get your bubbles stable and then plug the solenoid into a timer. Another tip is to let go of the needle valve when adjusting the bubbles, as touching it seems to mess up the flow. Most people start at 1 bubble per second, and the needle valves can be a little bit touchy. So congratulations! You've just set up your Fzone CO2 generator kit. I find making CO2 to be a lot of fun, but that's not really why I use the Fzone Gen. I use it because I don't have access to a welding shop or a gas exchange to get a traditional tank and system refill. I found that the Fzone kits seem to be extremely safe, as some other brands don't even have pressure relief safety valves or don't have a regulator on them and just rely on the needle valve. These kits from Fzone are a reasonable cost and are a great way to be introduced to CO2. Plus, it's a great learning experience making CO2. Also, understanding how that works could be a great teaching moment for kids and people who are new to the CO2. It's also worth noting that these kits don't come with any CO2 bubble for inside the tanks that tell you by color when the proper CO2 levels have been hit, so it's worth your time to probably pick up one of those as well. Well, that's it here. Thanks for joining me for the Fzone CO2 generation kit unboxing, install, setup, and modification video. You guys have all been awesome, and I hope you guys all enjoy your CO2 kits. Until next time, this is J-Rock, and we are out of here.